Welcome to the podcast, Jessica. I'm so excited to be chatting with you today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So, could you just tell everyone just a little bit about yourself and what you currently do?
Yeah. So, career-wise, I'm a functional nutritionist. I've worked as like a nutritionist and a coach in the hormone and female space for a while now, almost 5 years. But leading up to this point, like it was a little bit of a journey to get here. My own hormonal imbalances and my own health problems really led me into this place naturally. I never really thought I was going to end up here, but after struggling with my own issues, I had a lot of like autoimmune type issues and PCOS from a young age after coming off birth control at a very young age in my teen years. It kind of led me to this quest to figure out what was going on with my body because no one was going to help me. After seeing practitioner after practitioner, I just realized it's my job to figure out what's going on with my body and like my responsibility to take action on that. And so over the years, I went to took different certifications and went to school, but what I found lacking was this focus in on how female bodies actually worked and how to support them uniquely. And I found that a lot of the practices that were really common in the health and wellness space, which is mostly very restrictive dieting, no sugar, no dairy, no gluten, kind of this idea of like, work hard and no pain, no gain. And I just felt like it wasn't working. It wasn't working for me. Of course, I saw some improvements switching over from like a standard American diet or a more Western diet, but I didn't really see the improvements that I wanted. I didn't feel vital. I didn't feel like how I wanted to feel. And so it just really led me to this quest to figure out, okay, how can I heal myself? And then I just started kind of sharing what I have discovered, and it really has kind of snowballed from there. And now I have worked one-on-one with women for a really long time, but I've kind of transitioned more to educating and selling courses that really are just kind of a replica of what I do in one-on-one practice, but you can do it at your own pace and learn on your own time.
Right. Yeah. And I've definitely been there with you on that, doing like keto, paleo, AIP, all the different healing, quote unquote, like healing diets in a way, but like obviously they just kind of leave you like restricted, like you were talking about for sure.
Yeah.
So like with that, I guess just with birth control and that journey, like with that, is that just how you got like into nutrition?
Yeah, I think there was, I had hormonal issues ever since I went through puberty. So I think I thought these things were normal. I didn't know they were abnormal. So, that led me to being put on birth control, trying the different types of common PCOS treatments like metformin and those types of things. But I realized pretty early on that, okay, I'm on my own. Like I have to figure this out. And so that's really what got me into nutrition, is just wanting to feel better, wanting to find answers, and also noticing that most women, as I became more aware that I was struggling, I started to realize like most women I know of any age, my mother, my mom's friends, my clients, because I was working as a personal trainer at a gym at the time, and then me and all my friends and even acquaintances, I started to realize we all have some type of hormonal issue. Like none of us are really doing very well. So what's going on? And that's really what led me into this career.
So with that, like I know that you focus on like healing the metabolism. Can you talk about what a healthy metabolism looks like and like where people can start with like healing their metabolism?
Yeah. So I think a lot of people don't know what metabolism is. Like they've heard that, like, oh, speed up your metabolism. But that's not really what it is. It's everyone has an innate metabolism, which is how your cells take in what you give them, whether that be energy through calories, protein, carbs, and fats. They take certain nutrients like, let's say, minerals like magnesium, or water soluble vitamins like vitamin C, or fat soluble vitamins like vitamin K, and sunlight, and electricity and energy and vibrations. The cells take these things and then they produce something called ATP, and this is the energy on which our cells run. And so there's not really like that kind of false mentality of like speed up your metabolism, slow down your metabolism. That's not really what's happening. It's cellular impairment, and it's from our body not getting the proper resources or raw materials it needs to do its basic jobs. And so when our metabolism is struggling, or we go into what it's called kind of a lot of people refer to it as a hypometabolic state. It's when our cellular metabolism can no longer function optimally anymore. So everyone has a capacity to have a really strong metabolism. That's going to look a little differently for everybody, but everyone can have a really strong functioning metabolism. And that energy is going to really affect our structure, you know, our hair, our skin, our nails, our organs, our bones, because every single one of those things are made of cells. And when those cells are not getting the resources that they need, they start to just do what's called compensating. So they'll start to maybe put something else in place of the thing it doesn't have, or skip a job because it can't do the job appropriately. And over time, this leads to full body breakdown. It can lead to different symptoms, over time disease, because the body just no longer has the tools it needs to do what it's meant to do, which is restore itself.
And yeah, with that, I think not many people think that it's like cells and how, yeah, it's just more than speeding it up or whatever, you know, it's just like so much more than that, and how it's just in charge of like so many different things, like your hair, your skin, your nails, like digestion and like hormones and like all that, which people just, don't really know about.
Yeah, I feel like everyone's focused on the body fat, which is great. You know, I think, you know, having a healthy, maintainable weight is great, but to be able to open up fat cells, because fat cells are really just storing fuel for later. So it's excess calories, whether that be carbohydrates or free fatty acids. To open up those fat cells and actually use what's inside of them takes energy. It takes safety, because the body stored that fat for a reason. It wanted to keep itself safe from something, whether that be the cold, it wanted to maintain its body temperature, it felt like it was going to go back into a famine. You know, yo-yo dieting and restrictive dieting is very popular right now. And so the body will store extra energy for later. And if you want to go and access that extra energy later, you need the energy to do so. So it actually takes energy to burn energy.
Right, for sure. And so with that, like, what are, I guess, some of your tips for just like healing the metabolism?
Yeah, so I think that fundamentally, in my opinion, in my career, comes back down to nourishment and what I call nourishment. I think a lot of people call, you know, taking care of your health and being mindful of your diet nourishment, but it is so much more than that. It's making sure that your body has the resources and the tools it needs day in and day out on a consistent basis. And I kind of categorize this into 3 categories. So we have our overarching macros, which is protein, carbs, and fat. We need protein to rebuild structures. We can think of it as like our building blocks. We need fats to create stability, because fats create this kind of outer barrier of the cell. And then we need carbohydrates, because our cells actually run mostly on glucose. There are certain cells that can run on both fat, free fatty acids, and glucose, but certain cells like our brain, our central nervous system, which actually goes all the way, like branches into our fingers and our toes and our gut, and then our hair follicles, they only can run on glucose. And when they're starved of glucose, they just start malfunctioning. And then our body actually has to manufacture glucose, which is done using stress hormones. And we could probably talk about that a little bit more in a second. But then we have like minerals, which I consider the spark plugs of the body, or kind of like our armor. They create a resilience to the outside world. And the more stress we're under, and the more, you know, the more fuel we burn, the more things we do, the more activities our cells do, the more minerals we require. Now, unfortunately, our soil is very depleted. Our water no longer is full of these minerals. And so we're really struggling. So we need those overarching energy, the protein, carbon, fats, we need the minerals, and then we need the vitamins. So fat soluble vitamins like vitamins A, D, E, and K, which come from animal fats. And then we need those kind of water soluble vitamins, which are going to be like vitamin C and B vitamins. And all of these things, in addition to our kind of non-nutritional needs, which is like sunlight, rest, and play or creativity, are going to allow us to really like regenerate and rejuvenate. And that is really the fundamentals to healing our metabolism. And obviously there are more caveats to that, strategies behind that, but fundamentally it comes down to making sure our body has its needs met, basic biological needs.
Right. I really liked how you break that down with like the macro, like the minerals, like just how it's so important, because I've been focusing more on minerals. I think, just how like the spark plugs like of our cells, like I've heard. And so like they're just like so just key and important. I think people just don't always think about that, because people that like, I mean, myself, I probably you too have like removed fruit at one point, like in your life. And then,
Right.
like, I mean, that fruit has like just so many minerals, like they're just packed with minerals and like vitamins. And then our bodies like aren't getting that.
Yeah. Yep. I would say like many people are in your same boat where they go on these restrictive diets, not realizing like, for example, keto or a low carb diet really causes a lot of depletion or renal wasting of potassium. And so a lot of women I work with and a lot of my students, they typically come from like a low carb style of eating or a keto style of eating, and they wasted so much potassium that now they're having to really rebuild all of those minerals that were lost when on that kind of lower carb diet.
Right. So with that, could you talk about like our nervous system and how it's related to our gut and how it can like affect digestion?
Yeah. So our nervous system, a lot of people don't really know what the nervous system is. They might have heard about it because it is becoming more and more popular. People are talking about trauma and kind of parasympathetic and sympathetic, but really we have two branches of our nervous system. So we have the parasympathetic, which is kind of our rest, digest, reproduce. It's when we feel relaxed. And then we have our sympathetic, which is like when we go through traffic and we like someone cuts us off or we're running from something, that is that fight or flight response. And then we also have kind of a branch of that nervous system, which is called the dorsal vagal, which is a freeze response. So a lot of people are going to typically be familiar with fight or flight. It's where you feel like I can go. But the freeze is actually like the opposite. You just feel like you kind of want to lay in bed all day, watch Netflix. So those are two kind of versions of a stress response. But we want a good balance of the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. So we want to be able to jump into fight or flight when we need to protect ourselves, but a healthy nervous system is going to be able to jump back into that rest and digest and reproduce very quickly. So the stressor passes, our body's done, and we like calm back down. But what's happening is a lot of people are living in this constant sympathetic state, constant fight or flight state. And eventually their body can't sustain the high energy needs of staying in that fight or flight. And so they eventually just cross over into that freeze state because their body's trying to now conserve that energy. But the goal would be to actually find balance between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. And so our nerves, our brain and our central nervous system, which is our spinal cord, is connected to nerves that go all throughout our body. We have one main nerve called our vagus nerve, and that actually runs down our spine. It's our longest nerve. It's connected from throat to cervix. And that vagus nerve is an important function for the digestive system because all the nerves that connect to all the digestive organs and the reproductive organs are connected to the vagus nerve. And to get proper vagus nerve function or tone is sometimes called vagal tone, you actually have to be in the parasympathetic or that rest and digest state. And unfortunately, some people are spending all their time in sympathetic that they're never getting that vagus nerve stimulation, which is required to send all these nerve signals to our reproductive organs and our digestive organs. And then on top of that, our what's called our enteric nervous system, which is all the nerves and neurons that run through our digestive tract and our gut, has more neurons in it than actually our brain and spinal cord combined. So what's happening in our gut and what's going into our gut, whether that be emotional or physical food, is going to affect our nervous system and our nervous system response because all of those neurons and a lot of our nervous system is actually concentrated there. There's a reason why we get those gut feelings so strongly. It's because most of our nervous system, how our body's processing our experiences is right there in our gut.
Right. Yeah, I think I heard that recently. Yeah, that we have more nerves down there, which is just crazy to think because people would think it's all in the brain.
Yeah.
It's not.
I know, it's so crazy.
Yeah. So I just want to switch over to like meal density because I know that you've taught about it recently. So could you explain like what it is and like why it matters?
Yeah. So meal density is really important. Going back to the nervous system and really creating balance in the system. A lot of people are carrying so much emotional baggage. They jump into the stress response so easily, and they really don't know where to start. They're emotionally dysregulated, their nervous system dysregulated, but physically they're not feeling well. And so this is where nourishment really, it comes back to nourishment is if you want to balance your body and you want to balance your nervous system and you want to tell your body it's safe, you need to provide that safety. And sometimes taking care of our physical needs is a way to communicate safety when we're not quite ready or able to take care of our nervous system, our emotional needs, or really dive into the emotional sides of what's going on with us. So I would say that meal density and making sure we're eating frequently enough, especially for females, is so important. And so when I talk about meal density, really what meal density is how a meal feels in your body. So a lot of people want to just kind of bring or funnel food down to protein, carbs, and fat, or just calories, or sometimes points or whatever. People are using all these programs now, but food is so much more. It really is energy in a sense. And even if a food has the same amount of calories, the same amount of macros, same amount of protein, carbs, and fat, let's take a smoothie, for example, a little protein powder, some blueberries, and some milk or juice. And we've got, some protein, carb, and fat in there, or we have a pot roast with carrots and potatoes and broth. We could have the same calories, the same protein, carbs, and fat content, but those meals are going to make somebody feel completely different, right? Drinking a smoothie or having some pot roast over mashed potatoes. That's going to feel different in your body. And every woman has a different need for meal density. Some women do really, really well on these kind of lighter meals like smoothies and salads and cottage cheese and fruit. But I would say a majority of women can only use those foods as snacks. And they really need something to anchor their blood sugar, anchor them down, ground them, make them feel more rooted. And these more dense foods like potatoes and sweet potatoes and rice and kind of these like denser carbohydrates paired with these denser proteins like steak and beef and chicken and those types of things are really important. So finding your correct meal density is really about looking into how it does something feel in your body and really opting for the things that make you feel warm and grounded and kind of relaxed and not so kind of spacey and out of control all the time, which is kind of what I feel like most women are used to living in. It's promoted very much as normal in our society to like run off of coffee and like a couple bites of your kid's lunch and just kind of, live day to day in this like spacey, stressed out state. But you as a woman really want to make sure that you're eating things that are going to ground you and make you resilient to the stressors around you.
Right. I think that's so important because I remember, I don't know, like a few years ago, just eating like a smoothie for breakfast and then I would still just feel hungry after. And like, it just makes so much sense with like the meal density, how like you're saying like a pot roast and then a smoothie, like they're just so different. Like it's more of like a snack, like you said, like a smoothie would be, for like it's not technically, like a meal.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
So with that, let's talk about carbs and just like, like why are they just like so nourishing and important, like especially for women?
Yeah, so carbs have really gotten a bad rap. And I feel like some people will say this, but as a majority of the health and wellness community right now is kind of opting for this more low carb style of eating. And or saying that, vegetables like green vegetables and cruciferous vegetables and things like squashes aren't enough carbohydrates to get a woman through. But the thing about the female body is that we expend a lot of energy within ourselves. So we're in this constantly cyclical state. We're really cycling all the time. And that's happening internally, right? I can stand completely stoic and completely still. And my body is still cycling right now. It's going through a bunch of processes to make sure that reproduction is possible. Because no matter what a woman's personal purpose is, the body's purpose, physiological purpose is reproduction. And so everything that happens during our cyclical years, our at the time when we're cycling or having a menstrual cycle, is to make sure that we can reproduce and reproduce well, and that our child will be safe and nourished and healthy. And so our body is concerned with that. And so when society has really gotten kind of stuck in this more calories in, calories out mentality, but that's very much based on the masculine physiology. When it comes to females, we expend so much energy within ourselves. And when we don't have enough energy, our body really needs it. And so it will make it. And even just our central nervous system, going back to the discussion on the nervous system, needs about 130 to 150 grams of carbohydrate per day, which most women, I would say, do not eat that much. That's actually considered low carb because just to think, breathe, remember our brain is running all of our body's processes without us even thinking about it. Just to do those basic things, if we were just lying like a vegetable, we still need a good amount of energy. And then add in, our career, taking care of the kids, exercise, the challenges that come with relationships, whatever it might be, financial stressors, all of those things add more need for energy on top of that. And so you can see how if you're not eating enough carbohydrate, your body is going to have to either go without that energy or make that energy. And like I said before, there are certain cells in the body that just cannot run on anything but glucose. And so how our body makes glucose is actually a very difficult process called gluconeogenesis that requires both adrenal hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, and then it requires a lot of burden on the liver. And what happens is the adrenals will increase things like cortisol and adrenaline, which are technically called corticosteroids, and technically they're glucose manipulating steroids. And what they'll do is they'll actually initiate something called catabolism. Catabolism really sounds, it is what it sounds like, which I say is like cannibalism. We're eating ourselves. Right. So when we secrete these hormones, we are actually breaking down our own tissue. You think of our tissue as muscles, skin, hair, organs, digestive organs. We will take some of those proteins, those amino acids, we'll break our own tissue down, send it into the bloodstream, and then the liver will pick those amino acids up and turn those amino acids into sugar. That process of turning amino acids into sugar is called gluconeogenesis, and it's very tough on the liver. It requires a lot of magnesium. It requires a lot of sodium, a lot of potassium. It requires tons of B vitamins, all of those nutrients that we actually need to function, grow hair, all of these wonderful things for our metabolism. And so over time, women who run on what I say or call run on stress hormones find that their body starts to break down slowly. They'll start to age quickly. Their hair will start to fall out. They won't be sleeping as well. Maybe they'll start to gain weight, lose weight, start having thyroid issues. Their periods will start to suck. They won't ovulate as regularly. Their body will start to compensate and decide and prioritize what's important for survival. And that is what it is being in a survival state or a fight or flight state. So not eating enough carbohydrates for your body, which it varies based on your activity, output, your own metabolism. A lot of women have gotten into a place where they have a very hard time using glucose. So maybe their glucose needs are a little lower until they can use glucose better. But all in all, every woman needs carbohydrates. How much? That's of course debatable and contextual based on the individual, but we need carbohydrates to function. And if we don't, we're going to have central nervous system problems. We're going to have a hard time thinking straight. We're going to not have great mental clarity. We're going to feel like we can't really handle a lot of stress. We're overwhelmed very quickly. We're triggered very easily. We feel very addicted to drama. And it becomes this vicious addictive cycle where we actually are so addicted to those stress hormones, the adrenaline, the cortisol, we actually seek it out. So we seek out things that will instill fear or chaos or shame or guilt in our bodies because that gives us a quick hit of those stress hormones. And to stop that cycle, we actually have to lower those stress hormones by providing our body what it needs and getting ourselves out of that cycle. And the easiest way to do that, in my opinion, goes back to nourishment, eating every couple of hours, combining protein, carbs, and fats, and just nourishing the body day in and day out consistently, communicating to it that you're safe, you're cared for, there's abundance. You don't need to make your own fuel anymore. I've got you.
Yeah, I think that's just all so important, just how you broke that down. And also, I know you were saying before, just how our body needs glucose with hair, skin, and nails. And so when you avoid those things, that's when basically your body starts taking it from your body. That's what you were saying, correct?
Yes.
Yes. So it starts to break down.
Right. So you'll either start to see the body will stop prioritizing any fuel use towards these things, or those things will just slow down. So your hair will be slow to grow. Maybe your hair will start to fall out. Maybe your skin will look lackluster. It won't have that vibrancy that you maybe got used to. Your nails might become breakable. Those things may not happen to some women. Some women have other symptoms. They have really bad digestive issues, or they have teeth issues, or they have hormonal problems. The sky is kind of the limit with that, but oftentimes you'll see some signs of eating yourself over time. You start to look haggard, dark circles under your eyes, your cheeks might start to look gaunt. Women have a specific layer of fatty tissue in between our skin and our muscle. This is why women tend to have a more curvy type figure. We don't have such harsh lines, and we'll tend to lose that. And so you can often see this on people that do very restrictive dieting, they've lost that kind of nice layer of plumpness between their skin and their muscle, and it leads to them looking more vascular and kind of having just you've lost that protective safety layer that gives you that plump, youthful, vital look. So that's usually like if we start to see ourselves age, or we start to see our hair fall out like a lot, or our hair really change texture, or we're definitely sometimes women will start to lose their eyebrows, or their eyebrows will start to thin. There are different things, but usually it's a sign that our body is having to compensate in some way, and those things unfortunately are not important for survival as much as we think they are vital to survival. Our body doesn't think so.
Right, for sure. So with that, I just want to talk about stress, because I know that you did a post earlier this year saying like, but I'm not stressed. But like we actually are. So like many people just focus on like food and supplements, which I know like I have in the past, and then like you just don't think about like anything else contributes like to your health. But healing is just so much more than that. So could you talk about stress and just how the brain is just really like in charge of it all, and like also like our mind too?
Yeah. So I think that food and supplements are so amazing, and it can definitely be what I call like a bridge or a gap point, where you're kind of bridging the gap to get to a little bit of a better place, so you can more focus on that mental, emotional health. Because sometimes we're just so burnt out, so hormonally imbalanced, so miserable, that we just need some relief first. And then we're like, okay, I think I can handle this. But sometimes it feels just that everything's too overwhelming to take on. But I see this mistake being made a lot in the health and wellness community, where people are so focused on all the things, food, supplements, fasting, cold therapy, saunas, detoxing. They're all about all that stuff, but they're in their mind, they're still stuck on this really negative feedback loop. And I call them the like lower base emotions. These are emotions that really drain the life out of us. They drain those minerals, they drain that energy, and that's going to be fear, shame, and guilt. And many women carry baggage, whether that be from childhood, things that happened as they were growing up, or any traumas in between, that really have instilled this kind of what I call is kind of like a set program, where you go back to that place of fear, shame, and guilt. Like that's your natural place. And when you stay stuck in that loop, it's negative self-talk, looking in the mirror and, picking apart all the things that are wrong with you. Sometimes we have somebody's voice in our head telling us, what to think about ourselves. That pulls us down. It drains us very quickly. And so dealing with that emotional baggage is very important, and how we actually approach our life stressors, because life is stressful. People will say like, lower your stress, lower your stress, lower your stress. And you're like, life is stressful in and of itself. There are things that you just have to do in life that unfortunately you can't remove. So how it's not necessarily about removing those things, but actually being able to react to those things, react to the stressors in your life in a much better way. How is your body physically reacting? And then how is your mind reacting? Are we constantly jumping to this place of self-protection or fear or shame or guilt? Are we reminding ourselves, and our self-talk is like, everything's going to be okay. Like I can handle this. No big deal. Like we will fight through it. And then also really being able to connect to your body. A lot of women in this hormonally imbalanced place, or this nervous system imbalanced place, are very disassociated from mind and body. They're all in their head. They cannot connect to their body. And so most women are going from day to day to day, not even able to put a name on what they're feeling. They don't know that they're tense and tight in their neck and jaw. They don't know that their pelvic floor is tight. They don't know that they're constantly sucking it in because their mom told them one time when they were 6 years old, suck it in, So they have no connection between mind and body. And so part of healing and part of this nourishing journey is, yes, learn how to meet your basic physical needs, which most of us did not learn how to meet. Things like sleep, food, all of that stuff. But then once you can do that and your body feels safe enough and consistent enough in getting that abundance, it's time to get deeper and start reconnecting mind to body. What are you feeling from your fingers to your toes, from your head to your toe? And are you able to actually respect those feelings? So when you go through an experience and your gut's telling you, say no, say no, say no, and you say yes, you just dishonored and disrespected yourself, because your body told you the answer to that question and you made a different decision. And so part of this nourishing journey and healing journey is getting back connected to your body and then honoring it and respecting it, because that's a whole nother thing. So, because it can be really hard at first, right? When you're used to skipping meals and you're used to just being a people pleaser to now, even when you feel fat or even when you feel overweight, even when you're not happy with yourself or your body, you still feed it. You still nourish it. Doesn't matter how you're feeling. That can be a really hard, bridge to cross. But once you do, you really can't go back. And the same thing goes for once you stop saying, you know what, they're not as important as what I'm feeling in my body. I'm going to respect myself and honor myself. F the consequences. That is really honor and respect. And so this kind of, it's stress is not necessarily what's happening in our lives and things going on around us. Sure, there are some things that are stressful that we can say, absolutely no, I said yes to that 6 months ago, and now I'm going to say no to that. But it's more than that. It's like our basic life experiences should not be so overwhelming and stressful that we just shut down and go into that dorsal vagal or that freeze state. We need to get to a point where we can face our stressors head on, and we have that strong armor of minerals. We have that resilience that comes from nourishing ourselves and meeting our body's needs. Our body is strong and capable. But then we have to get to a place where that our mind is now can meet our body. And that's really where that but I'm not stressed. Well, yeah, because your brain's going a mile a minute and you haven't calmed yourself down yet. You haven't turned that negative story, that fantasy or that fairy tale that you're telling in your head into a positive one. And that's kind of what I mean by that.
Yeah, I just saw that post and I was like, that's just so important, because I feel like so many women, like you said, are just stressed. They're just running off stress hormones, or their brain, their mind is just, they're just in that chronic state of fight or flight freeze, and then they just think that they're okay, but really they're not. Yeah. So with that, I know that you focused on trauma and stuff this year. I've just seen that you shared about it. So with that, would you say people need to really dig deep into trauma, or I don't know, retraining your brain, vagus nerve, different things like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think that there is a time and a place for everything. I think a lot of women, this idea of trauma and digging into your emotional wounds. I know therapy has blown up in the past couple of years and different modalities, but I think for what women have to remember about trauma and the nervous system is that, again, we go back to this, the certain constructs in our society go after male physiology. Males live in their head. They do a lot of healing in their head. Women, we live in our body. We need to flow through it. We're constantly cycling. We have that feminine or cyclical nature. And so a lot of times a woman's basic problem is that her head and her body has disassociated. And so I am hesitant to encourage someone to just dive into their mind more. Most women are living constantly in their head. I think it's a really good idea to make sure that your basic physical needs are met. I'm sorry, you're never going to heal your mind if you can't feed yourself, if you can't get to bed at a decent hour, or at least make those attempts and start trying. And I think a lot of women will dive into this kind of trauma space and start driving into, EMDR or talk therapy, and they start to get, their body just cannot handle the junk that they're trudging up. Because when you start to dig up those emotional wounds, think of it as scar tissue that you're ripping open. Your body has to have the energy to process that stuff. You're processing emotions. Emotions are absolutely exhausting to process. And if you do not have the energy, or you're not meeting your basic physical needs to process that stuff, you're going to have a very difficult time. It's going to feel constantly overwhelming. Your emotions are going to feel like they just absolutely burden you and overwhelm you, because when you open up those wounds, there is a little bit of junk that starts to come up, and you have to be able to face it with resilience and strength. And that's why I think nourishment can sometimes be a helpful bridge to get to the point where you're ready to dredge that step up. I personally like more somatic therapies, things that are going to help connect the mind to the body. I think that those I've noticed in my practice and in my own life and my own experience have been so much more helpful than things that just kind of keep me in my mind. Things like dancing and moving. I really love a technique called emotional freedom technique. I actually really love hypnosis. I think hypnosis can be a really great way to bridge the gap and reconnect to the body. Pelvic floor work and really opening up the hips and working on our vulva, our labia, our vagina is very helpful. A lot of us store a lot of emotion and tension there, whether that be self-massage or working with specialist, or even doing something like yoni steaming, or just some basic things to reconnect. Even just basic hip openers can be very helpful because we store so much emotion there. And then really working in on our jaw and our neck. So I think a mixture of modalities is always good. I think everyone's different in the way that they're going to approach things and what's going to be right for them. But for me personally, and from what I've seen, is that getting a woman to spend more time in her head is usually the kiss of death, right? It turns us into just emotional messes because we have no coping mechanism, no coping skills to allow that stuff to move through our body, to really allow emotion to be balanced and to come back to a place of balance. We actually have to move through that emotion. It has to be able to flow through our body. You can't just feel it in your head or say like, oh, I'm feeling sad today. You actually have to feel the sadness. You have to let it move through you. I think a lot of women are not letting that happen. And they're approaching their trauma the same way that they would anything else in the very masculine, rigid, like checkbox to-do list. Like, I got to heal my trauma now, like check, and they're not understanding that that is going to be some messy, chaotic work. And you have to really connect to that primal kind of raw side of yourself and let yourself feel. Feeling sadness, dealing with bouts of crying, anger, rage, all these emotions is not pretty. It's not something that you can check off a list. It's definitely not going to be something that's going to come in like on your schedule. It's going to be coming in waves. And so you need to make sure that you're capable and resilient enough to face it head on and have the strength to say, I'm okay to feel this.
Yeah, and I think what you said, like, just goes back to nourishment and goes back to like make sure you're eating enough, especially like carbs, proteins, and fats, and getting like those minerals are just like very, they're just key.
Yeah.
And all else, like you said, like if you just go into it head on, then you're just gonna be overwhelmed, and like it's like you said, like the kiss of death, like it's just gonna be too much. So I also want to just talk about cortisol, since it is like the main like stress hormone. So with that, what are some signs that it may be like chronically elevated, and what are some ways that we can help just like lower like that stress response?
Yeah. So I think cortisol in general is very misunderstood. We need it to have that wake and sleep cycle. So it's part of the circadian rhythm. As we wake up during the morning and we get sunlight in our eyes, our body's cortisol will naturally rise and peak kind of mid-morning, it seems. Everyone has a different peak, but it's going to be, let's say, mid-morning. And then over the course of the day, it will slowly start to wane. And then as night starts, then melatonin will start to rise. And that's kind of our sleep hormone, and it will bring us to bed. Women are not as driven by the circadian rhythm as men are. Men only are driven by the circadian rhythm. Their testosterone peaks in the morning, and then it kind of wanes over the course of the day, and then they kind of reset the next day. Women, we do respond to the wake sleep cycle of the circadian rhythm. The sun's very important for us, but we have that infradian rhythm, or that kind of 28-day cycle rhythm, where our hormones are different every single day. And so even if this is where I think there's a lot lacking in the health and wellness space. With cortisol, women are going to respond to cortisol differently throughout their cycle. So no matter their levels, their cortisol binding globulin and the things that actually help us respond to cortisol are going to be different. And then our resilience to stress will change based on where our estrogen is at and our progesterone is at. So when it comes to cortisol, it's important in balance. We want we want everything in balance. But what happens is when we start to run on stress hormones or get addicted to this kind of fight or flight state, or this fight or flight feeling, we begin to rely on our adrenal glands, which are like these little tiny, they're kind of like hats that sit on top of our kidneys and our back, to make us sugar and to fuel our body, because our body needs sugar when we're under stress. And this could be bad stress, like running from an angry bear, or good stress, like I just exercised and I did it on an empty stomach. Our body needs fuel. We do not run on thin air. And so when we have chronically elevated adrenal hormones, because sometimes women will find that their cortisol is high. Some will find that the cortisol is in the trash can because they've ran on stress so long that now their output is very low. Mm-hmm. Some women rely more on adrenaline than they do cortisol. Some women rely on cortisone, which is like a metabolite of cortisol. So it's kind of like a backup cortisol. So there are many different stress kind of responses, and it's going to be different for every woman. But the bottom line is, if we rely on our adrenal hormones to make us fuel, which is the problem, or we're chronically stuck in fight or flight. So we rely on our adrenal hormones to just get us through the day, you know, chug coffee, get angry, you know, listen to whatever, like very, very loud music. Like people really get addicted to this stuff. When we do that, over time, we're going to see, usually it's going to be this tired but wired feeling. So the feeling in our body is going to be like, I could sleep for 8 years, but I also go to lay down and I can't fall asleep. Or when I do fall asleep, I get very poor sleep. Physical things like hair loss, skin issues, whether that be acne or dry skin, thinning of the lips, the outer third of the eyebrows can start to fall out, because what happens is when we are running off these stress hormones, they actually suppress our thyroid hormone. And that's really where the problem starts to lie, is we start to see our metabolism get stressed out. We'll either gain weight, more weight than we need, or we'll lose more weight than we need. We can't keep or maintain a healthy weight. We have a hard time gaining muscle because our body's eating through the muscle faster than we can build it. A lot of times women will lose their appetite. They will have digestive issues. A lot of times, whether that be constipation, diarrhea, feelings of IBS, undigested food in the stool, can't digest protein, have no taste for protein, can't digest fat because, you know, it's floating when they have a bowel movement. There's a lot of different symptoms, but bottom line is, it's what would happen if you were running from an angry bear. You're not going to want to digest food. You're not going to sit and have a meal. Your body's not going to really expend energy growing hair, repairing your skin, you know, repairing your eyesight. Those types of things are just going to be not important. And so your body's is only going to focus on the basic things needed for survival. And so blood pressure can change, insulin sensitivity will change because the body might need more sugar in the bloodstream. And so it's going to change insulin sensitivity to keep the blood sugar elevated a little more. So many different symptoms, but bottom line, it's usually belly fat. You're not going to be able to lose weight, or you're going to feel like you store a lot of fat in your belly. You're having a hard time building muscle, so that kind of like skinny fat feeling of just like, I work out, but I just like don't gain any muscle. I don't have any curves. And then just overall feeling just burnt out, overwhelmed, triggered, anxious, and then other hormonal imbalances can definitely come with that.
Right. Yeah. I think, yeah, there's just so much with that. And I think, yeah, the main one is like, I guess the weight around just, do people call it the flat tire or whatever? Like the weight, you know, like it's just like you have that. It's just around like the midsection, basically.
Yeah, and it's kind of droopy because the reason behind that is that the belly fat cells, think about it, our reproductive organs, all of our vital organs are kind of in our abdomen. And so when you think of fat as fuel stored for later, it also creates a lot of warmth. That fat is going to provide some safety when there's not safety in your external environment. And so that's why we do end up storing fat there. And then those fat cells are also, they can expand quite bigger than most of the fat cells in our body. So they're just more sensitive to cortisol as well. They react to cortisol very, very quickly.
Right. So with that, what are some ways to, I guess, just like calm that stress response, or just, help to support it?
Yeah, I would say my favorite way is just to stop eating a bunch of crap. And what I mean by crap is like the non-food foods that we've come to think of as health foods. A lot of women their whole diet is made up of like raw vegetables, hemp seeds, chia seeds, flax seeds, like all this weird stuff, like oat milk, almond milk, all this stuff. Like nobody ate this until like the past 20 years. So go back to your roots. Like what were your ancestors eating? Well, they were eating like eggs and meat and dairy, cheese, butter, milk, fruit that's in season, vegetables that are in season, roots, properly prepared grains. These are foods that our body actually can recognize, knows how to digest and assimilate the nutrients from. All those non-food foods, I like to call them, are not going to provide your body the same nutrition that these traditional foods do. So that's the first thing. Just get the non-food food out of your diet. It'll save you tons of money, but it will also be so helpful for your body. And then the next thing would be what I call food frequency. It's very simple, but eating something every couple of hours, like every 3 to 4 hours, can be life-changing for some women, especially women who are so used to just like skipping breakfast, not eating regularly. They're like, I don't need to eat lunch. I'm not even that hungry. When you don't have an appetite, that's a sign that stress hormones are running your whole system, because you're not going to be hungry when you're running from an angry bear. But getting your appetite back should be your first goal. So eating every 3 to 4 hours, even if it's just a little something, really helps take some stress off the adrenals so that they're not pumping out so much cortisol. And I know that feels counterintuitive. Like I eat and I might lose belly fat, but what you'll see is a lot of women that I've worked with, and I've worked with thousands, is that what happens is their fat starts to redistribute. So a female body, a woman's body, is often going to have a little bit more body fat than what's considered at right now societally normal. It's very popular to kind of have these like lean physiques with these big booties and these big boobs, but in reality, a woman's body, especially fertile in your fertile cycling years, is probably going to have a little bit more body fat than what's societally deemed acceptable, because we need that extra stored safety to create a place of stability. So we have enough fuel and storage for the growth of a child, and then again, the feeding of the child. And so when you worry too much about the body fat, you're going to miss out on the hormonal benefits of eating every couple of hours. What a lot of women will see is that their fat, which is usually stored in their abdomen, we call it like adult baby syndrome, where when you're chronically stressed out, you're going to have like stick-like limbs, and then you're going to have a lot of fat stored in your stomach. And then when you start to balance your hormones and get your stress levels down and get your thyroid function up and really get to that optimal place of metabolic function, you may not lose a ton of weight, but your body fat will start to redistribute into other places. So you might see some go to your arms, a little bit go to your breast, you might see some go to your butt and your thighs, but it will often lead to a little bit more of an hourglass type figure, because that's how women are meant to store fat. That's why we have this kind of elevated estrogen. Estrogen signals to the fat cells to store fat in certain places. So instead of really fighting for like, I just want to be as skinny as possible, really work to nourish and build a really strong and resilient body, and then let the body redistribute fat how it needs to stay safe and hormonally balanced and fertile and just vibrant and radiant.
I think that's so important, especially with just seeing stuff on like Instagram or like in the magazines where women are just like stick thin, and then it's like people just think that that's normal, when it's like, okay, like you see that, but like that's not, just because someone's skinny does not mean that they're healthy, like they could have like so many different like health issues, and then they just look quote unquote okay, but like we don't know how they truly feel. And so I think it's just so important to just like avoid that. Yeah, just like avoid like seeing that, because it's like that's not the, what is it, like the face of like health, it's like so much more than that.
Exactly. And I things that I've thought about is like, I don't really know very many women in real life who look like that, except for like maybe like a 14-year-old girl, like I personally have really never met a woman, maybe once or twice, like they're like hardcore obsessed with like exercise and like counting every macro. But really, there's not a lot of women that I know in real life that can keep that lean physique without a ton of work that most of us are just not willing to do. So I would say that we kind of all just should like collectively just let it go. And we'll all be just so much happier.
Yeah, I agree like so much with that. So I want to talk about your courses that you have, just like that they focus like on metabolic health. I know that you have one, I don't think it's out yet, about like gut health.
No, it's not quite out. I'm working on it right now, so it should be out in the next couple of months. It should be out this year. I always say like it'll be out this year, but sometimes projects I'll take on and then I'm like, this is much bigger than I thought it was going to be. But my current courses are, I have a kind of a mini course. It's called Mend Your Cycle. It really is a way to kind of bridge, like if you're just kind of overwhelmed with all these concepts, but you want something to just get started on, it gives you 11 action steps, and it's $50. So it really just kind of is like a quick barrier to entry. You get it's only 75 minutes. So it's kind of just a small way to like learn your cycle and get started on the concepts that I talk about. And then my actual signature course is called Fully Nourished. And I teach all of these principles about stress hormone, the thyroid function, and your cycle, and then how to practice proper food frequency, protein, carbs, and fats, busting these myths that some of these foods that are considered health foods are not health foods. And that's kind of my signature course, where I've actually had thousands of women go through, and we have like a community of these women who continue to support one another through this nourishing journey. And then my gut course will be coming out soon, and it's going to be more focused on kind of the concepts we talked about today, it's going to take the concepts I teach in Fully Nourished, which are really foundational, and really expand upon them to, how do we restore gut function and digestive health and nervous system function, which are also interrelated, and really focus in on those minerals to build that resilience to stress so that the body can balance itself. And so it's going to be kind of an expansion on all these concepts.
I love that. Yeah, you just, just like on your Instagram, like you just share like so much. So I can't imagine like what your course would be, just be like so much more information.
Yeah, I'm so excited.
Yeah. So what is one thing that you do to live nourished?
Yeah, I think lately and this year has been just like letting it go and really like asking myself, how does this feel in my body, rather than like in my head, this person said this, or this person says this, or I know this, because I have so much research in my head, so many things that I've learned, and it can be even difficult for me to listen to my body. And so for me now, living nourished really means like, how does this feel in my body? And that can go for food choices, that can go for life choices, whatever it might be. I'm always asking like, how does this feel in my body? And if I'm not quite sure, then I just wait or I say no. But that alone, other than the principles like eating well and loving myself, but for the most part, it's really just like, how is this feeling today in my body?
Yeah, I think that's so important, because I think what we were talking about earlier, how we've just kind of lost being in tune with our body, and we're just not listening. I think that's just like so important, especially just like now, today, just like because there's so many things going on in our world, and then we're just kind of like all over the place, like what we were saying. But it's so important to just like be in tune with your body and just
Absolutely.
listen.
Absolutely.
So where can everyone find you and connect with you?
Yeah. So the best place to find me is on Instagram at Jessica Ash Wellness. I also have a website that kind of is like a hub. So if you're more of like a website person, you like to read blog posts, I repost my Instagram posts on the blog just so people can access them. And then of course my courses, which are on my website and also at the link in my bio on Instagram if you want to get more information or get more connected.
Great. Thank you so much for chatting and just coming on the podcast. You're just so knowledgeable. And yeah, I just love like everything that you share.
Oh, well, I appreciate you for having me. Thank you so much.